When I moved to Boston, all I wanted was to save on rent, so the idea of sharing an apartment seemed perfect. I found Sarah through a roommate website. She seemed nice during our conversations before I moved in. She had a calm smile, was friendly, and even mentioned that she liked keeping spaces organized, something I really valued. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. She was a bit reserved, but that didn't bother me. In fact, it was nice to have someone who respected personal space. However, over time, Sarah started making me uncomfortable. She paid more attention to everything I did than was normal. I got a new haircut, and the next day she had the exact same one. I bought a new jacket, and she bought an identical one, right down to the color. At first, I thought it was a coincidence or maybe harmless admiration. But things got progressively weirder. She started mimicking how I spoke, using the same expressions and slang. If I mentioned liking a song or a movie, the next day, she acted like it had been her favorite for years. The turning point came when she began showing up at the same places I frequented, as if by coincidence. I would go to a cafe after class, and there she was. I went out with some friends she didn't know, and suddenly, she appeared at the bar, acting like it was a happy accident. The most unsettling part was that during these coincidences, she didn't try to interact with me much. She just lingered almost like she was watching me. One day, I noticed that my things were out of place when I got home from work. My hairbrush was wet, though I hadn't used it, and clothes in my closet seemed disturbed. I asked Sarah, and she laughed, saying maybe I was just getting paranoid from stress. But something inside me told me that wasn't the case. So, I decided to take an extreme step. I set up some hidden cameras in my room. I knew it was drastic, but I needed to figure out what was going on. What I saw in the recordings gave me chills. Sarah would go into my room as soon as I left for work. She would put on my clothes, look at herself in the mirror, mimicking my gestures and expressions. In one video, she lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling for a long time, then began rummaging through my drawers. In another, she even sprayed one of my perfumes. All of this while I wasn't there, as if she were trying to become me. I was utterly terrified. This wasn't just about privacy invasion anymore. It was something far deeper and more disturbing. Sarah wasn't just copying my style. It seemed like she wanted to be me. I faced the reality. I needed to get out of there fast. The next morning, I confronted her directly, asking if she had been messing with my things. The calm smile she always wore disappeared, replaced by a cold, distant look. She didn't deny it, but she didn't confirm it either. She just said in a disturbingly calm tone, "I just wanted to see what it's like, living your life." That was all I needed to hear. I packed my things and left immediately. I moved out the next day, without looking back. I never spoke to Sarah again, but I often find myself wondering what more she could have done if I had stayed any longer. I spent months looking over my shoulder, afraid she might show up somewhere, pretending once again to be a coincidence. Since then, I've never wanted to share an apartment with anyone. And every time I think about how she slowly tried to take over my life, I still feel a chill down my spine. When my friend Bianca and I decided to move into an apartment in Seattle, it was a practical and budget-friendly choice. The building was old, but the rent was affordable, and the location in Capitol Hill was perfect for us. As soon as we settled in, we met some neighbors, including a man named Alan, who lived at the end of the hallway. He seemed really nice, always smiling and offering to help. Alan was the kind of neighbor you felt grateful to have around. He even lent a hand when we were setting up some furniture. In no time, we started considering him good company, especially since we were new to the city and far from family. The first few weeks were peaceful, until strange things started happening. One night, we came home from dinner and found the apartment door slightly ajar. I asked Bianca if she was sure she had locked the door before we left, and she swore she had. We decided not to dwell on it, thinking it might have been a mistake. But from that point on, odd things kept piling up. Small objects like my keys or the TV remote would show up in different places than where we had left them. We began to suspect each other, thinking maybe we were just being forgetful or distracted. Things got worse when one afternoon, we came home early from work and found Alan inside our apartment. He was standing in the living room, holding a bottle of our water, with a completely calm expression on his face. We were stunned. He quickly explained, saying that the door was open, and he had come in to check if everything was okay. That made us uneasy, but Alan had always been so friendly that we didn't question it much. After a quick apology, he left, and we immediately locked the door. However, after that incident, we started finding creepy notes left around the house. The messages were simple but disturbing. One read, "I know what you do at night." Another said, "You're never really alone." Panic began to set in. We called the building manager and asked for the lock to be changed, but he seemed to think we were overreacting. That's when we decided to install hidden security cameras inside the apartment, without telling anyone. What we saw in the footage chilled us to the bone. The cameras captured Alan entering our apartment several times while we were out. He seemed to have a copy of our key. In some recordings, he simply walked around the rooms, touching our things, taking pictures of our clothes and personal items. In one instance, he lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling for several minutes before leaving. The terror that filled us was indescribable. Alan wasn't just a friendly neighbor, he was a predator. We took the recordings to the police immediately. Alan was arrested that same week. During the investigation, we found out he had a long history of stalking and invasion of privacy. He had already been arrested for similar behavior in another city, but had managed to move to Seattle without anyone knowing about his past. The entire time we thought he was just a helpful neighbor. He had been watching us closely, studying our habits, and violating our personal space. After he was taken away, Bianca and I moved out of that apartment as quickly as we could. The sense of safety we had once felt was gone forever. Even now, in a new place with new neighbors, I'm always on edge. I never leave the door unlocked, not even for a second, and security cameras have become a permanent fixture in my life. What seemed like an innocent friendship revealed a dark side that still sends chills down my spine when I think about how exposed we were without even realizing it. It was a regular night, one of those evenings where all I wanted was to relax after a long, exhausting day. I was home alone in a quiet neighborhood in Richmond, Virginia. As always, I locked all the doors and windows, made sure the alarm system was on, and settled into the couch with a cup of tea and a movie. Everything felt perfectly normal until around 10 o'clock when I heard a strange noise coming from the back door. At first, I thought it might be the wind or maybe a stray animal, but the sound kept repeating like someone was trying to force the lock. My heart began to race. Holding my breath, I slowly stood up and made my way to the kitchen, where I could see the back door from the hallway. When I got close enough, I saw the door handle moving slightly. I didn't think twice before sprinting back to the living room and dialing 911. As I waited for the police to arrive, every second felt like an eternity. The fear crept in deeper and deeper with each passing moment. The horrible realization that someone was trying to break into my home. When the police arrived, they quickly checked the property and confirmed that someone had indeed been tampering with the lock. There were clear signs of an attempted break-in, but strangely, nothing seemed to be missing. Nothing was out of place, and it didn't look like anything had been stolen. I felt a slight sense of relief, thinking that maybe the intruder had run off before getting inside. Still, that night left me on edge, and I spent the following days rechecking the security of my house, double-locking everything out of pure paranoia. However, the real terror didn't reveal itself until a few days later. While organizing my bedroom, I noticed something odd on the high shelf where I kept books and decorative items. A tiny light blinked among my things. Curious, I pulled down a box and found what looked like a hidden camera. My stomach churned in fear. The initial fear I felt the night of the break-in was replaced by a gut-wrenching realization. Someone had been inside my house, not just looking for valuables, but watching me. I called the police again, and this time, they sent a more specialized team. They combed through the house, finding subtle signs that someone had been moving through my space. I felt violated, completely exposed. But the worst was still to come. After weeks of investigation, the police finally found evidence that the intruder hadn't just entered my home once. He had been there multiple times, taking pictures of me while I slept. The man responsible was a complete stranger, someone the police had been tracking for similar crimes in other parts of the state. He was meticulous, skilled at avoiding detection, and somehow had managed to enter my home without me realizing it. The fact that he had been inside, watching me as I slept, going through my personal belongings, made my once safe home feel like a prison of fear. Every sound at night made me jump, and every shadow looked like a lurking figure. The police eventually caught him, thanks to the camera footage and evidence he had left behind from previous break-ins. He was arrested, but that didn't bring me much comfort. Knowing that someone had been so deeply inside my life, watching me during my most vulnerable moments, made me question everything. It didn't matter how many locks or alarms I had in place. My home no longer felt like a sanctuary. I moved out shortly after that. I couldn't bear to stay in the house where my privacy had been so thoroughly invaded. While I left the house behind, I carried the trauma with me. Even now, I struggle to sleep through the night, always alert for the slightest noise. The idea that someone could infiltrate your life so deeply without you even knowing haunts me every day. Even though he's behind bars, the feeling that you're never truly safe lingers, turning every night into a battle for peace of mind. If you're enjoying the stories so far, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more creepy stories just like these. And hey, have you ever had a paranormal experience? Drop a comment below and share your story with us. We'd love to hear it. Now let's dive into the next story. My friend Mariana and I were completely drained after weeks of intense work, so we decided to take a weekend trip to unwind at a secluded cabin in Blue Ridge, Georgia. We were craving silence, fresh air, and an escape from the urban stress. The cabin, nestled in the middle of a dense forest, seemed like the perfect retreat. We rented the place online, and when we arrived, everything was as peaceful and serene as the pictures had shown. The dirt road leading to the cabin was rarely used, and we couldn't see another house for miles, exactly the kind of peace we were looking for. The first night was quiet, up to a point. We were sitting in the living room, chatting about trivial things, when we began to hear strange noises outside. It sounded like heavy footsteps, as if someone was walking around the cabin. At first, we tried to ignore it, thinking it might be wild animals since we were deep in the woods. But the longer we listened, the harder it became to brush it off. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. We stepped outside to check, but we saw nothing except the darkness of the night and the trees swaying in the wind. The next morning, while I was outside gathering firewood, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Human footprints around the cabin. They were clearly outlined in the damp mud, and they weren't ours. They were larger and seemed fresh. I showed them to Mariana, and we both stood in silence for a moment, processing what this meant. Someone had been lurking around our cabin the previous night, watching us. We decided we weren't staying another night. The plan was to pack our things and leave as quickly as possible. However, as we were getting everything ready to leave, we heard a knock at the door. Mariana and I exchanged panicked glances. Who could it be? I cautiously opened the door, and standing outside was a man who looked to be in his 50s, wearing worn-out clothes and with an expression that shifted between friendly and unsettling. He told us his car had broken down further down the road and asked if he could use the phone. Both of us hesitated, but the situation seemed urgent, so we reluctantly agreed. We let him inside to use the cabin's landline, as there was no cell signal in the area. While he was inside, the atmosphere became tense. He was polite, but something about him felt off. Mariana and I stood frozen, watching him dial a number that didn't seem to connect. Before he left, he gave us a strange look and, with a slight smile, said, "You know, you really shouldn't stay here alone. Bad things happen in this place." Without waiting for a response, he walked out the door and disappeared into the trees. We stood there for a few seconds, paralyzed with fear. As soon as he was gone, we locked the door and hurried to finish packing. The only thing on our minds was getting out of there as fast as possible. We got into the car and drove down the dirt road, trying to calm our nerves. But what we saw a few minutes later sent a new wave of terror through us. The man's car was parked by the side of the road, completely intact. It wasn't broken down, and it didn't seem to have any issues at all. He had lied. Worse yet, there was no sign of him anywhere, as if he had vanished into the forest. Once we made it back to the nearest town, we went straight to the police station to report what had happened. The police listened to our story and promised to investigate, but a few days later, they told us they couldn't find any man matching the description we gave. No car had been reported broken down or abandoned on the road. It was as if he had never been there. This left us even more unsettled. Who was that man? What did he really want? And what might have happened if we had stayed another night at that cabin? To this day, we still don't have answers. What was supposed to be a relaxing weekend turned into one of the most terrifying experiences of our lives. Every time I think back to that night, a shiver runs down my spine, wondering what that man had really been planning. When I moved to Denver, I was excited to make new friends. So, when I met a group of girls at work, I was thrilled to be invited to hang out with them. The group consisted of 4 girls: Emily, Laura, Chloe, and Maya. They seemed inseparable and always had exciting plans: dinners, parties, and spontaneous trips to the mountains. At first, it was a lot of fun. It felt good to have company in a new city, and their energy was contagious. They made me feel like I was part of something special, and that was exactly what I needed. However, as time went on, I started to notice something unsettling. Whenever we went out, a good portion of the conversation was spent criticizing people who weren't present. At first, it seemed like harmless gossip: who did what at work, who wore what, but soon, things took a darker turn. They didn't just talk about people. They seemed to take perverse pleasure in planning ways to humiliate or sabotage them. I started feeling uncomfortable, but I convinced myself that maybe I was overreacting. After all, they were my friends, and it wasn't unusual for close-knit groups to be brutally honest about others. Things really started to change when the jokes turned on me. Subtle comments about my clothes, the way I spoke, or even how I acted on social media. "Oh, we're just kidding," they'd say with a smile, but the frequency and tone of the jokes made me more and more uneasy. I tried to laugh along, pretending it didn't bother me, but soon I realized I had become the constant target of their mean-spirited remarks. One night, after a few glasses of wine, Maya made a strange comment saying, "Every group needs a victim." The others laughed, but the tone in her voice wasn't playful. My heart sank. I asked, trying to keep it casual, what she meant by that, and Laura laughed, saying that every year they pick someone to be the group's joke. At first, I thought it was just another one of their morbid jokes, but then everything started to fall into place. Their behavior toward me had shifted dramatically. They began excluding me from events and plans, and when we were together, the snide comments became more frequent and more direct. One day, after an especially uncomfortable lunch, Chloe casually mentioned how she knew things about me that could ruin me. I was confused until I remembered that during one of our earlier hangouts, back when I still trusted them, I had shared some personal secrets. Chloe looked me in the eye and, without hesitation, said, "It would be a shame if everyone found out." That was when I finally understood the full extent of their cruelty. The group had a dark tradition. Each year, they chose a friend to sabotage. They made her feel included, gained her trust, only to later turn her life upside down. I was their chosen target for the year, and now they were ready to destroy me socially and emotionally. Everything I had shared with them, my insecurities, my vulnerable moments, were now weapons they planned to use against me. I knew I had to escape this toxic circle, but I was trapped. When I tried to pull away, they started threatening me directly. "If you stop hanging out with us, everyone will hear your little secrets," Emily said with a chilling smile. Each of them knew too much about me, things I never wanted to get out. It felt like I was stuck, held hostage by the fear of exposure, even though staying near them was destroying my sanity. That night, I made a decision. It didn't matter what they said or did, I had to get out. I blocked them all on social media, deleted my accounts for a while, and reached out for support from friends outside the group. Of course, they tried to intimidate me for a few weeks, spreading lies and rumors, but slowly their threats lost momentum. Even though some secrets did come out, nothing was as devastating as they had hoped. Looking back, I see just how deeply manipulated I had been. That friendship was a twisted game from the very start, a sick cycle of control and humiliation. It took months to rebuild my confidence and my social life, but in the end, I was able to break free from that poisonous web. What scares me the most is wondering how many other girls they've put through the same nightmare before me. It was a typical night at a bar in downtown Portland. My friends and I were relaxing after a long work week, laughing and chatting, when we met a new guy. He seemed friendly, the kind of person who fit into any group easily, so we didn't think twice about inviting him into our circle. His name was Marcos, and within minutes, he was telling jokes, making witty comments, and connecting with everyone. He came across as harmless, the kind of person you meet by chance, and who quickly becomes part of the group without any concerns. At first, everything seemed normal. Marcos was always around when we went out. He was sociable, and he even insisted on paying for rounds of drinks. I didn't pay much attention to him initially, but as time went on, I started noticing something strange. Marcos always tried to isolate people in the group. He sought out private conversations or moments where he could be alone with someone. It began with me when he said he wanted to get to know me better and invited me for coffee one-on-one. There didn't seem to be any harm in it, but I declined, saying I was busy. Soon, he started doing the same thing with my other friends. He would invite each of them out individually, always setting up situations where no one else from the group was around. At first, we all thought he was just trying to build personal connections, but then things began to shift. The conversations with him grew more intense, more personal, and whenever he was alone with one of us, he would start talking negatively about the others, planting seeds of doubt about our friendships. One afternoon, I received a message from Marcos saying he needed to talk to me urgently. We met up, and with a serious expression, he said, "I think you should know. The others are talking behind your back." My stomach sank. He went on to claim that he had overheard conversations where my friends were ridiculing me and plotting to exclude me from their plans. I was shocked, but something about the way he spoke, calculated, controlled, left me uneasy. Instead of jumping to conclusions, I decided to confront my friends directly that same evening. I told them what Marcos had said, and to my surprise, I learned that he had been saying the exact same things to everyone else, spreading lies about each of us. None of us knew what to think, but it became clear that Marcos had been manipulating us, trying to break our group apart slowly, turning us against each other. The sense of betrayal and anger began to build among us. As we dug deeper, one of my friends did some research on Marcos and uncovered something even more disturbing. He found stories from other groups of friends that Marcos had infiltrated. In each case, the pattern was the same. He would get close to the group, form quick friendships, and then slowly start creating divisions, sowing distrust until the group was torn apart. In some instances, his interference led to physical altercations. Marcos had a systematic approach to causing chaos and would vanish as soon as things fell apart. Marcos wasn't just a friendly stranger. He was a manipulator who preyed on people's vulnerabilities. He exploited our insecurities and used them to create wedges between us. It was hard to understand his motive. Was it just for fun, or was there something darker driving him? What we did know for sure was that we needed to cut ties immediately. We blocked him on all social media, stopped responding to his messages, and avoided places where we knew he might show up. He tried to reach out a few more times, but each attempt was ignored. The most chilling part of the whole ordeal was realizing how close he had come to ruining our friendships. If we hadn't caught on in time, how many more lives would he have torn apart? The thought that someone could do this for no apparent reason, just for the thrill of it, still sends shivers down my spine. Now, we live our lives with more caution. That experience brought us closer as a group, but it also left us paranoid. Trusting new people isn't easy anymore after something like that. Marcos disappeared from our lives as quickly as he entered, but the emotional scars from what he almost caused still remain. And the question we all silently wonder, but never ask is, how many other groups has he destroyed without anyone knowing? For years, Anna and I were inseparable. We met in college in Austin, Texas, and from that moment, we were practically sisters. We shared everything, secrets, laughs, dreams, and I trusted her more than anyone else in the world. Anna was that friend who was always there, ready to listen or help when I needed her. For a long time, I never questioned our closeness. It felt like we had a bond that couldn't be broken, something rare to find. But over time, I started noticing something odd. Every time I got close to someone else, something would go wrong. A new friend would suddenly stop responding to my messages, or a colleague I trusted would start to distance themselves without explanation. At first, I thought it was just bad luck or coincidence, but it happened far too often to be random. What confused me most was that, during these moments, Anna was always there, offering her comfort. It was as if, with each lost friendship, she was waiting, ready to step in. Things started to unravel when I heard from a mutual friend that unpleasant rumors were circulating about me. People I barely knew seemed to have personal details about my life, things I had only shared with Anna. I was in shock, but I still didn't want to believe that she could have anything to do with it. Something deep down, though, told me it was time to confront her. One afternoon, I decided to have an open conversation. I asked her directly if she knew anything about the rumors, hoping for a reasonable explanation. What Anna did next was more disturbing than anything I could have imagined. She didn't deny it. Instead, with a cold, unapologetic smile, she confessed everything. Anna admitted that from the beginning, she had always been jealous of me. She said she felt like I was better than her at everything, friendships, accomplishments, life in general, and it ate her up inside. "I couldn't stand seeing you be so loved by others," she said, her voice chilling. "So, I did what I had to do. If you couldn't count on anyone but me, I'd be the most important person in your life." My heart dropped. Anna had been deliberately sabotaging my friendships, spreading lies, and manipulating situations to isolate me, while making herself seem like my only true friend. For years, I had trusted her blindly, not realizing she was tearing down my life behind my back. The sense of betrayal was indescribable. I was paralyzed for several minutes, unable to process the fact that the person I trusted most had been undermining me all along. I left her house without a word, consumed by a mix of rage, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Anna, the person I considered a sister, had been secretly working to destroy my relationships in ways I couldn't even comprehend. In the days that followed, I made the difficult decision to cut her out of my life entirely. I blocked her number, deleted all my social media accounts, and distanced myself from the shared social circle we had. It was like cleaning a deep wound, painful but necessary. I thought that would be the end of it, that she would move on, and I could finally find some peace. But Anna wasn't ready to let me go. Shortly after, I began receiving messages from anonymous social media accounts, all with a tone that was far too familiar. The comments were passive-aggressive, clearly written by someone who knew exactly how to hurt me. It didn't take long to recognize the pattern. It was Anna trying to creep back into my life, but this time from behind a digital mask. She made fake accounts, trying to add me as a friend, leaving comments on my posts, as if to remind me that she was still there. The feeling of being watched, even from afar, left me anxious and on edge. I never knew when she would pop up again with a new account or another attempt to re-enter my life. Anna's obsession with keeping me close, even after everything, showed just how deep her problem ran. I kept wondering how far she would go, what more she might try to do to infiltrate my life. Though I've cut Anna out for good, the damage she caused left lasting scars. Trusting people, something that once came so easily to me, became a struggle. The wound of being betrayed by someone so close took a long time to heal, and even now, I find myself thinking twice before sharing anything personal with anyone. What I learned from that experience is that sometimes your worst enemies can hide behind the mask of friendship. And the scariest part? The person who seems to always be by your side, offering support, might be the very one secretly working to tear you down. Anna didn't just almost destroy my friendships. She made me question my own ability to trust. It all started innocently enough. I made a new friend online, which seemed normal in today's world. I met Valeria in an online group dedicated to horror films, a passion we both shared. Our conversations flowed naturally, and before long, we were messaging each other almost every day. At first, it felt like a genuine friendship. We talked about our lives, our interests, our hobbies. She lived a few hours away from me, in a small town in rural Illinois, and she was always eager to visit. I thought it was cool. After all, finding friends who share your niche interests can be rare. When Valeria suggested we meet in person for the first time, I was excited but a little nervous. We arranged to meet at a cafe near my home in Chicago. In person, she seemed a bit more intense than she had come across online, but I chalked it up to different personalities. The afternoon was fairly uneventful, and I thought that would be the end of it. But soon after, things started to get weird. Really weird. Valeria began sending messages constantly. It wasn't just casual conversation anymore. It was dozens of messages each day, often demanding quick responses. If I didn't reply fast enough, she'd ask where I was, what I was doing, and why I couldn't talk to her right then. What had once felt like a light, fun friendship quickly turned into an overwhelming sense of pressure. Still, I tried to navigate the situation, thinking maybe she was going through something. Then one day, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I had never given her my address, so when I saw her standing there, I felt deeply uneasy. She claimed she was passing through the city and wanted to see me. I tried to be polite despite the surprise. We chatted for a while, but the atmosphere was off. After that, I grew more and more concerned. My social media profiles were set to private, so how did she know where I lived? I began to question if I had somehow mentioned my location without realizing it. But even then, Valeria kept appearing at places I frequented, coincidentally showing up at my gym or favorite cafe. The breaking point came one Friday night. I was alone at home, about to watch a movie, when I heard a strange sound coming from the living room window. It was a faint noise, like someone was trying to force the window open. A wave of panic washed over me. I turned off all the lights and approached the window slowly, praying it was just my imagination. But when I got closer, my heart nearly stopped. Valeria was standing outside, trying to open the window. The only thing I could think to do was run to my bedroom and call the police. As I explained the situation to the dispatcher, I could hear Valeria outside, murmuring something I couldn't make out, but it sounded insistent and unnerving. A few minutes later, I heard the sirens, and when the officers arrived, she was gone. The police launched an investigation, and that's when the horrifying truth came to light. Valeria wasn't just an online friend with boundary issues. She had a long history of stalking. She had been arrested before for similar behavior, and in one case, she had assaulted another woman who, like me, thought she had made a new friend. I learned that she moved from town to town, creating new profiles and infiltrating the lives of women, only to later invade their personal space and control them. After that night, I blocked her on all social media, changed my phone number, and even moved to a new apartment. The sense of security I once had was shattered completely. Even knowing that Valeria had been arrested, I still live with the constant fear that one day she might return. Every unexpected message or strange noise at night brings back that same dread. This experience taught me the hard way that people can hide much more behind a screen than we realize. What started as a light, fun friendship almost became an unending nightmare. Since then, I've been extremely cautious about who I let into my life, both online and in person. The danger, after all, could be just one message away. A few months ago, I received an unexpected message from a man named Daniel, claiming to be an old childhood friend. He said he had found me through social media and that we used to play together when we were little before I moved to a new city. At first, I thought it was strange because I didn't remember anyone by that name, but as he started sharing specific details about my childhood, my old street, the park we played in, I began to believe that maybe he was telling the truth. Daniel seemed to remember a lot about me that I had forgotten, which left me feeling both confused and nostalgic. He talked about the days we played soccer, about our first grade teacher, and even mentioned the name of the dog I had when I was little. These details made me think he might really be someone from my past, someone I had forgotten as the years went by. After chatting online for a while, we decided to meet in person. I was curious to see if he really was who he said he was. We arranged to meet at a cafe downtown, and when I saw him, he seemed harmless, even friendly. Daniel was funny, cracking jokes, and seemed genuinely interested in how my life had turned out since we had lost touch. The conversation flowed, and for a while I thought it was nice to reconnect with someone who supposedly had been a part of my childhood. But things quickly started to get strange. Daniel became increasingly insistent on knowing details about my life now. He wanted to know where I lived, what I did every day, and what my routines were. At first, I thought it was just innocent curiosity, but his persistence became uncomfortable. He kept asking where I worked, who I spent my time with, and when I would be home. This constant pressure started to unsettle me, and my gut told me something wasn't right. That's when I decided to ask my parents and family members about him. I shared Daniel's story and asked if anyone remembered this childhood friend. The answer was unanimous. No one had ever heard of him. My parents, who had always been involved in my social life as a child, and even my uncles who lived nearby, had no recollection of anyone by that name or background. That's when I became terrified. Who was he really, and how did he know so much about me? After that, I cut off all contact immediately. I stopped responding to his messages and blocked him on social media, hoping he would take the hint. But that's when things got even more frightening. A few days after I broke off communication, I noticed Daniel appearing at places I frequented. He showed up at the cafe I visited every day, pretending it was a coincidence. Then I saw him at the gym I went to, a place I had never mentioned to him. The feeling of being watched and followed started consuming me. Every time I saw Daniel, he would try to strike up casual conversations, but there was something deeply disturbing about his presence. These weren't coincidences. He was following me, and I knew it. I reported the situation to the police, but since he hadn't made any direct threats, there wasn't much they could do. They advised me to keep a log of every time he showed up or contacted me, and to avoid places where he might appear. In the meantime, I changed my routine, stopped going to my usual spots, and temporarily moved in with a friend, trying to escape Daniel's constant presence. What scares me most about all of this is that to this day, I don't know how he knew so much about me. Had he studied me before reaching out? How did he know such intimate details about my childhood? Things that only someone close to me could have known. This mystery still haunts me. Even after the sightings stopped and the police increased their watch, the sense of vulnerability stayed with me. Today, I don't trust strangers easily. Every message from someone claiming to know my past comes with a weight of doubt, and the idea of reconnecting with old friends is no longer as comforting as it once was. What started as an innocent, nostalgic friendship almost became a nightmare that could have completely upended my life. If you enjoyed these true horror stories, you won't want to miss our next video. Check out 10 disturbing true neighbor horror stories by clicking the card on the screen or finding it as the previous video on our channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments if you've ever had a paranormal experience. We'd love to hear your stories. Stay brave, and we'll see you in the next video.